Security camera footage showed 11:47 p.m. 5 armed men had entered the lobby of Chicago Financial Center, drawn their weapons, forced staff to the ground. While other security guards fled to the panic room, only one person remained calm. Maria Santos, 35 years old, 5 feet 3 inches, constantly mocked for being weak night shift security guard. But they didn't know that Maria would neutralize 5 armed robbers in just 30 seconds. And no one could have guessed that this weak woman was actually a war veteran who had served in the US Army's most elite operations. Maria Santos adjusted her security uniform as she walked through the gleaming marble lobby of Chicago Financial Center. At 35, she carried herself with quiet dignity that most people mistook for weakness. Standing at 5 feet 3 inches with a slender build, she didn't look like what people expected from a security guard in one of Chicago's most prestigious buildings. The other guards never let her forget it. "Hey, Maria," called out Jake Morrison from across the security desk. "Did you remember to pack your pepper spray? Wouldn't want you to break a nail defending the building." His voice carried that familiar edge of mockery that had become the soundtrack to Maria's work life. Mike Rodriguez, the head of night security, looked up from his newspaper and grinned. "Come on, Jake, give her a break. She's probably really good at checking visitor badges and making coffee." Tommy Chen, the youngest guard at 24, joined in with nervous laughter. "Maybe we should get her one of those pink tasers, to match her feminine energy." Maria said nothing. She'd learned long ago that responding only made it worse. Instead, she focused on her routine, checking the security monitors, reviewing the night's protocols, ensuring all systems were operational. Her movements were precise, methodical, habits formed over years of training that her colleagues couldn't see. What they also couldn't see was the small photograph tucked inside her security badge holder. A group of soldiers in desert camouflage standing in front of an armoured vehicle in Kandahar, Afghanistan. Maria was in the centre, rifle in hand, eyes hard, with the kind of focus that only comes from real combat. The inscription on the back read, "Alpha Team, 47 missions completed, Semper Fi. Sergeant Maria Santos, US Army Special Forces." But here in Chicago, she was just the diversity hire who worked nights because she couldn't handle the pressure of day shift. The disrespect hadn't started immediately. When Maria first applied for the security position at Chicago Financial Center 2 years ago, the hiring manager had been impressed by her references and clean record. But the military experience section of her resume had been intentionally vague. Security Operations Specialist, US Army, 2010 to 2018. She'd learned to downplay her Special Forces background. Civilians either didn't believe it, or they made her into some kind of action movie character. Neither reaction helped her goal of living a quiet, peaceful life. The problems began during her first week when Mike Rodriguez, who had been a mall security guard for 12 years, tried to train her on basic security procedures. "Okay, Maria, this is important," Mike had said, speaking slowly as if she were a child. "If you see anything suspicious, you don't try to handle it yourself. You call me or one of the other guys. Security work can be dangerous, and we don't want you getting hurt." Maria had nodded politely, even though she'd once spent 3 days behind enemy lines in Afghanistan, providing overwatch for a rescue operation that saved 14 captured soldiers. "And if there's ever a real emergency," Jake had added, "just get to the panic room and let us handle it. No shame in knowing your limitations." Her limitations. If only they knew. The pattern escalated over months. During training exercises, they gave her the easiest scenarios. During shift assignments, she got the quiet floors, while the men handled the important areas like the executive levels and the vault. During staff meetings, Her suggestions were politely ignored until one of the men repeated the same idea and received praise for his insight. The worst part wasn't the professional dismissal. It was the casual cruelty. The jokes about her size, her gender, her soft appearance. The bets about how quickly she'd quit when faced with a real security situation. The way they talked around her as if she weren't there, discussing how the building needed actual security professionals. 6 months ago, the mockery had reached a new level when Tommy Chen received a promotion to senior night guard, a position that should have gone to Maria, based on her performance reviews and seniority. When she asked the building manager about it, he'd given her a pitying smile. "Maria, you're a good worker, but leadership requires a certain presence. Tommy has natural authority. You're more suited to supportive roles." Natural authority. She'd once commanded a squad of 12 Special Forces operators in some of the most dangerous territory on Earth. But here, a 24-year-old with a high school diploma had natural authority, while she was suited for supportive roles. That night, alone in her small apartment on Chicago's South Side, Maria had pulled out her old military gear from the closet, her combat knife still razor-sharp, her tactical vest, worn but functional, her Army Commendation Medal for valor in combat, her Purple Heart from an IED blast in Helmand Province that had killed 2 of her teammates. She'd held that Purple Heart for a long time, remembering Sergeant Williams and Corporal Davis. Good soldiers, better people. They died protecting a village full of civilians they'd never met, in a country thousands of miles from home. And here she was, being treated like an incompetent amateur by men who had never faced any danger more serious than a late-night drunk in the lobby. For a moment, she'd considered quitting, finding work somewhere else, starting over. But she'd started over before, after leaving the military. Running away again felt like betraying something important, not just her own dignity, but the memory of her fallen teammates who would never have the chance to start over. So she'd put the gear away and returned to work the next day, enduring the smirks and the dismissive comments, and the casual cruelty of people who had no idea what real strength looked like. November 15th started like any other night shift. Maria arrived at Chicago Financial Center at 10:30 p.m., 30 minutes before her official start time. She used those extra minutes to walk the building, checking for anything unusual. Another habit from her military days: never assume the previous shift caught everything. The building housed 3 major investment firms, 2 law offices, and the regional headquarters for a Fortune 500 company. After hours, it was mostly empty except for cleaning crews and security, the perfect target for sophisticated thieves who knew how to time their operations. In the security office, the usual crew was already establishing the night's pecking order. "Maria!" Mike called out as she entered. "Perfect timing. We need someone to monitor the cameras tonight while the real guards do patrol rounds." "Yeah," Jake added, "and maybe you could organize the supply closet while you're at it. Keep yourself busy with something appropriate." Tommy was reviewing the night's security protocols on his tablet. "We've got VIP clients working late on the 47th floor. High-value stuff. I'll take that assignment." He looked at Maria with barely concealed contempt. "Unless you think you can handle protecting million-dollar deals." The implication was clear. She couldn't. "Camera duty is fine," Maria replied quietly, taking her position at the security desk. She'd learned to pick her battles, and tonight felt like a good night to stay invisible. But as she settled into her chair and began cycling through the camera feeds, something caught her attention. A white van parked across the street that hadn't been there during the day shift. 2 men inside sitting too still, watching the building too intently. She made a note in the security log. 11:15 p.m. Suspicious vehicle, Illinois plates 4 B7-M9K3, 2 occupants, conducting surveillance. Mike glanced over her shoulder and snorted. "Suspicious Vehicle? Maria, it's probably just guys waiting for their girlfriends to get off work. Not everything is a threat. The cleaning crew finished an hour ago, Maria pointed out, and they're focused on our building specifically. Look, Jake said, walking over with his hands on his hips. I know you want to be helpful, but you're seeing things that aren't there. This is exactly why we need experienced professionals handling security decisions. Maria was about to respond when the lights in the lobby flickered and went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, casting everything in an eerie red glow. And in that red light, through the main entrance cameras, Maria saw 5 figures in dark clothing approaching the building. They moved with military precision, coordinated, professional. Each carried what appeared to be automatic weapons. Mike, Maria said, her voice sharp with urgency. We have armed hostiles approaching the main entrance. What? Mike rushed to the camera monitors. I don't see any... His words were cut off by the sound of shattering glass. The main lobby cameras showed 5 men in tactical gear, faces covered, weapons drawn. They'd blown the front entrance and were already inside. Jake grabbed for the alarm button, but it was too late. The building's communication systems had been jammed, another sign these weren't ordinary criminals. Panic room! Mike shouted. Everyone to the panic room! The 3 men rushed toward the secured safe room, designed for exactly this kind of emergency. But Maria remained at her station, watching the monitors with the calm focus of someone who had seen this kind of operation before. These weren't random thieves. This was a professional hit, planned and executed with military precision. The timing, the equipment, the tactics, everything suggested serious training and significant resources, which meant the panic room wasn't safe. If these men were as professional as they appeared, they'd know exactly where the security team would hide. Maria! Tommy called from the panic room doorway. What are you doing? Get in here! But Maria was studying the tactical situation with 8 years of Special Forces training. 5 hostiles, automatic weapons, coordinated entry. They'd cut communications and power. One team was heading for the elevators, probably going for the high-value targets on the upper floors. But 2 men were moving directly toward the security office. They knew exactly where to find the guards. The panic room is compromised, Maria said, standing up from her chair. They know our protocols. What are you talking about? Mike demanded. It's a secure room. That's literally the point. If they studied this building enough to plan this operation, they studied our security procedures too. The panic room is a trap. Jake looked at her with disbelief. Maria, you're not qualified to make tactical decisions. We follow protocol. We hide, we wait for police backup. But Maria was no longer listening to their protests. She was accessing a part of herself that had been dormant for 2 years. The part that had kept her alive through 47 combat missions. The part that had earned her a Purple Heart and an Army Commendation Medal. The part that had made her one of the most effective operators in Special Forces. She moved to her locker and retrieved her personal bag. Inside, beneath her civilian clothes and lunch container, were items she'd never expected to need again. Tactical knife, zip ties, emergency medical supplies. Not weapons exactly, but tools that could make a difference in the right hands. Maria, get in here right now, Mike shouted from the panic room. Stay there, she replied, checking the monitor one more time. Lock the door and don't come out until I tell you. You can't handle 5 armed men by yourself. For the first time in 2 years, Maria Santos smiled with genuine confidence. You're right, Maria Santos, night shift security guard, can't handle 5 armed men. She moved toward the security office door, her posture shifting from civilian employee to combat operator. But Sergeant Maria Santos, U.S. Army Special Forces, with 47 successful missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, definitely can. 11:47 p.m. Security camera footage would later show exactly what happened next, though investigators would need to slow down the recording to follow the action. The first two hostiles entered the security office expecting to find cowering guards. Instead, they found darkness and silence. Maria had killed the lights and positioned herself behind the doorframe, a tactical advantage that civilian guards wouldn't know to use. The first gunman entered cautiously, weapon raised, scanning for targets. He never saw Maria moving behind him until her arm came around his neck in a perfect blood choke. 8 seconds of applied pressure and he dropped unconscious. Maria caught his weapon as he fell. The second gunman realized something was wrong and turned toward the struggle. Maria was already moving, using the first man's body as cover while drawing the tactical knife from her belt. The blade found the gap between the second man's vest and helmet, a precise strike that neutralized him without fatal injury. 2 down. 11 seconds elapsed. The third hostile heard the commotion and called for backup while approaching the security office. Maria was ready for him. She'd repositioned to the opposite corner, using the security desk as cover. When he entered, focused on where his teammates had fallen, Maria struck from his blind spot. A textbook takedown. Arm lock, controlled fall, submission hold. He was unconscious in 4 seconds. 3 down. 18 seconds elapsed. The remaining 2 hostiles entered together, smart enough to realize they were facing serious opposition. But they made the mistake of assuming they were dealing with a single lucky guard who had gotten the drop on their teammates. They weren't prepared for someone who had spent 8 years training for exactly this kind of close-quarters battle. Maria used the room's layout to her advantage, forcing them to split their attention between multiple angles. She moved between cover points with the fluid efficiency of someone who had done this dozens of times in real combat situations. The fourth gunman went down to a combination strike. Knee to solar plexus, elbow to nerve cluster, blood choke, combat techniques designed to incapacitate quickly and quietly. The fifth and final hostile was the team leader, more experienced and better trained than his colleagues. He adapted to the situation quickly, using proper tactical movement and communication. But he was still facing someone with superior training and 8 years of combat experience. The final confrontation lasted 6 seconds. Maria feinted left, drew his aim, then moved right while closing distance. A strike to his weapon hand disarmed him. A follow-up technique put him on the ground, unconscious but alive. 5 down. 28 seconds elapsed. When police arrived 40 minutes later, they found 5 unconscious men zip-tied and arranged neatly in the security office. All weapons secured, all suspects alive and ready for arrest. They also found 3 security guards locked in a panic room, staring at their colleague with expressions of shock and disbelief. "How did you—" Mike started to ask, then stopped, looking at Maria as if seeing her for the first time. "I told you," Maria replied calmly, straightening her security uniform. "I had it handled." The investigation revealed that Chicago Financial Center had been targeted by a professional theft ring with connections to international crime syndicates. They'd spent months studying the building's security protocols, staff schedules, and emergency procedures. The plan had been to take hostages while accessing the firm's secured servers containing cryptocurrency keys worth approximately $500 million. Detective Sarah Walsh, the lead investigator, interviewed Maria 3 times trying to understand exactly how a night security guard had single-handedly neutralized 5 armed professionals. "According to the camera footage," Detective Walsh said during their final interview, "you moved like someone with extensive tactical training. Military training," Maria nodded. "U.S. Army Special Forces, 2010 to 2018. Sergeant, 47 combat missions, primarily in Afghanistan and Iraq. Why didn't you include that information in your original employment application? I did. I listed my military service as Security Operations Specialist. That was technically accurate. Detective Walsh looked at Maria's service record, which the Army had finally declassified for the investigation. Says here, you received an Army Commendation Medal for Valor during a hostage rescue operation in Kandahar, and a Purple Heart from an IED attack that killed 2 of your teammates. Yes, ma'am. You were recommended for promotion to Staff Sergeant before you left the service. Why did you leave? Maria was quiet for a moment. After losing my teammates, I wanted to try civilian life, something peaceful, quiet. And you chose security work. I thought my skills might translate well, and I thought people would respect the experience. Detective Walsh closed the file. Mr. Santos, based on your actions last night, the Chicago Police Department would like to offer you a position in our tactical unit. Your military record and demonstrated capabilities make you an ideal candidate. It was a generous offer. A chance to use her skills professionally with proper recognition and respect. But Maria shook her head politely. Thank you, Detective, but I like working at Chicago Financial Center. The Monday after the incident, Maria arrived for her shift to find a very different atmosphere in the security office. Mike Rodriguez stood up when she entered, something he'd never done before. Maria, good to see you. Jake Morrison actually pulled out her chair. We saved you some coffee. The good stuff, not the break room brew. Tommy Chen approached with obvious nervousness. Maria, I wanted to apologize for, everything. I was completely out of line and I'm sorry. The change was dramatic and immediate. Word had spread throughout the building about what had happened. The weak night security guard had saved everyone's lives and prevented a $500 million theft. Local news had picked up the story. Security industry publications were requesting interviews. But, more importantly, her colleagues finally understood who they'd been working with. I also wanted to ask, Tommy continued, if you might be willing to help train the security team. I mean, obviously, we need to improve our tactical response capabilities. Maria looked at the 3 men who had spent 2 years dismissing her capabilities and questioning her qualifications. They were sincere in their apologies and genuine in their respect, but something had shifted in Maria that couldn't be shifted back. I appreciate the apologies, she said quietly, and I'm willing to help with training, but I want to make something clear. She moved to the security desk and pulled out the photograph from her badge holder, the picture of her Special Forces team in Kandahar. I didn't suddenly become qualified last Tuesday night. I was always qualified. I was always capable. I was always the most experienced person on this security team. The 3 men stared at the photograph, seeing Maria in full combat gear, surrounded by her military unit. The only thing that changed, she continued, is that you finally saw it. Mike Rodriguez cleared his throat. You're absolutely right. We were wrong about everything. Why didn't you tell us, Jake asked, about your military background? Maria put the photograph back in her badge holder. I shouldn't have had to. My work should have spoken for itself. My professionalism should have earned your respect. My 2 years of excellent performance reviews should have established my credibility. She looked at each of them directly. But instead, you saw a woman and decided I was incompetent. You saw someone smaller than you and assumed I was weak. You made judgments based on appearance and gender instead of capability and character. Tommy shifted uncomfortably. So, what happens now? Now, Maria said, settling into her chair at the security desk, we do our jobs. We protect this building and the people in it. We work as a team, a real team based on mutual respect and professional competence. She turned to the monitors and began her evening security check. And if you ever dismiss someone's abilities based on their appearance again, you'll answer to me. The changes at Chicago Financial Center went far beyond the security department. News of Maria's background and heroic actions had prompted a company-wide review of hiring practices, promotion policies, and workplace culture. The building's management instituted new training programs focused on recognizing and developing all employees' capabilities, regardless of gender, age, or appearance. Maria was promoted to head of security and tasked with rebuilding the entire department's training protocols. She approached the job with the same methodical precision she'd brought to Special Forces operations. New hiring criteria emphasized capability over appearance. Training scenarios included real-world tactical situations. Performance evaluations focused on competence rather than assumptions about leadership presence. The most significant change was cultural. The casual mockery and dismissive attitudes that had made Maria's life miserable were no longer tolerated. Not because of new policies, but because her colleagues finally understood the difference between perceived weakness and actual strength. Mike Rodriguez, now Maria's second in command, had become one of her strongest supporters. "I learned something important," he told new security recruits during their orientation. "Real strength doesn't announce itself. Real expertise doesn't need to prove itself. And real professionals don't need to put others down to lift themselves up." Jake Morrison had requested a transfer to day shift, partly to learn from Maria's methods, and partly because he was embarrassed by his previous behaviour. "She could have let us rot in that panic room," he admitted to his wife. "After everything we put her through, she still saved our lives." Tommy Chen had enrolled in evening classes to pursue a criminal justice degree, inspired by Maria's example. "I want to actually deserve the respect she showed me," he explained. "I want to be worthy of working on her team." The transformation wasn't limited to the security department. Other employees throughout the building began questioning their own assumptions about colleagues they might have overlooked or underestimated. The incident had become a catalyst for examining workplace dynamics that many had taken for granted. On a quiet Tuesday evening, exactly 1 year after the robbery attempt, Maria sat in the security office reviewing the day's reports. The building was secure, her team was professional and competent, and her work environment had become everything she'd hoped for when she first applied for the job. A new security guard, Jennifer Walsh, a recent college graduate, was finishing her first week of training. She was young, enthusiastic, and unfortunately, already facing subtle skepticism from some of the building's older employees. "Ms. Santos," Jennifer said during a break in their patrol rounds, "some of the staff seem to think I'm too young for this job, too inexperienced. How do you deal with people who don't take you seriously?" Maria smiled, remembering her own struggles with respect and recognition. "You prove them wrong by being excellent at your job. You maintain your professionalism even when others don't. And you remember that their assumptions say more about them than they say about you. But what if they never give you a chance to prove yourself? They will. Maybe not immediately, maybe not willingly, but eventually circumstances will reveal who you really are. And when that moment comes, you'll be ready." She looked at the young woman with the same mentoring attention she'd once given to new Special Forces recruits. "The most important thing to remember is that real strength doesn't come from proving others wrong. It comes from knowing who you are, regardless of what others think." Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. What if that moment never comes? What if you spend your whole career being underestimated? Then, you spend your whole career being underestimated while doing excellent work, helping people, and living with integrity. There are worse ways to spend a career. Maria turned back to the security monitors, watching the peaceful building she'd helped protect and improve. But, in my experience, that moment always comes eventually. The question isn't whether people will finally see your capabilities. The question is whether you'll be ready when they do. As her shift continued through the quiet night, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her from the battlefields of Afghanistan to the security desk of Chicago Financial Center. It hadn't been the path she'd planned, but it had taught her something valuable about strength, respect, and the difference between being seen and being appreciated. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't won with weapons or force. Sometimes they're won by quiet competence, unwavering professionalism, and the patience to wait for truth to reveal itself. And sometimes, when the moment finally comes to show who you really are, 30 seconds is all you need to change everything. The security camera footage from that November night became a training video used by security companies across the country. Not just for the tactical techniques Maria demonstrated, but for the lesson it taught about recognizing and developing talent regardless of preconceptions. Maria Santos still works at Chicago Financial Center, now as Director of Security for the entire building complex. She still arrives 30 minutes early for her shifts, still walks the building checking for anything unusual, and still maintains the quiet professionalism that her colleagues once mistook for weakness. The difference is that now they understand what real strength looks like, and they've learned that the most dangerous assumption you can make about someone is that they're exactly what they appear to be, because sometimes the person you underestimate is the only one standing between you and disaster. Sometimes the quiet one in the corner is the one who will save your life. And sometimes the person everyone dismisses as just a security guard is actually the most qualified person in the room.